Right, this is going to be a review for H.P. Lovecraft's short story, The Color Out of Space. I will link it below in the description box. These are in the public domain, so you can find them if you want to search for them. I'll link it so you can read the short story. This is the complete fiction of H.P. Lovecraft. I have it in a hardcover. Here's the ISBN if you want to screenshot that and order it for yourself. This came out from Chartwell Books. That's where I got it. So there you go. The short story itself is about 30 pages long, and it's the story. I'm going to a brief synopsis. I won't spoil the ending or anything for you, but I want to talk about this first, then I want to talk about this adaptation. So, in the short story, we have the Gardner family. There's a man named Nathan Gardner, and he lives in this town, or in the suburbs of a town called Arkham. And the story is being relayed to us nearly 50 years after the events that take place. The events are called the Strange Days. And the whole area where this story takes place has been transformed into kind of a gray, dead, burned out, it looks post-apocalyptic, essentially. The whole area is called the Blasted Hearth. I think it's Hearth, or Heath. Blasted Heath. I think that's what it's called. The story is being relayed to us from a surveyor because they're going to put in a dam over this area, and he's there to investigate the water tablet. And he talks to an old man who remembers the events that took place here. His name is Amy Pierce, and he was a friend of the Gardner family. Now, why this story works is because it's isolated. The story's actual setting, when the events happened, were in the 1880s, so in the Gilded Age, in that post-Reconstruction period in America, just prior to the turn of the century. And they're living in New England, in this secluded area. And a space meteor comes down from, outer space, and that's when everything begins to happen. The transformation of the ecology surrounding them. It affects their livestock. It affects the animals around. And it brings on this blight, this terrible wasting disease that just doesn't affect the people physically, but mentally as well. And that's all I'm going to tell you about it. I don't want to go any farther because I don't want to ruin the story for you, because it is one of H.P. Lovecraft's better stories. And when I saw that they made a film of it, I was intrigued. I didn't rush right out and watch it. So this came out like 3 years ago, I think. Maybe it's been 4 years. I think the film came out in 2019. So I'll talk about this adaptation. So I checked it out from my local library. I saw that they had it there, and I was interested in this adaptation, The Color Out of Space. It has Nick Cage as Nathan Gardner. But I gotta say, I'm very disappointed in this film. Everybody really hyped this up. I saw people online, oh, it's the best H.P. Lovecraft adaptation ever. I would disagree. I think that this movie completely fails as an adaptation. For one thing, The Color Out of Space ends up becoming like an entity, like your standard monster. It ends up being like an energy cloud thing that chases people around with predator vision, and that's the way I'm going to describe it. That's the way other people have described it, and very disappointed in that. That is not at all how the this entity or whatever this is. That's one of the things about H.P. Lovecraft. We don't even know what it is. I mean, his stories are so ambiguous that your mind kind of has to fill in the horror, and that's what makes his tales work is because it's this unknown other. Like, what is it? Like, we don't even know what it is. Well, in this film, it's a thing, that chases people and transforms the surrounding area. And whereas the events in the book took place over the course of maybe a year and a half to 2 years, the events in this book take place over the course of a week. So everything's accelerated, and it doesn't work for me. It doesn't work. It's the transformations that take place in this book are more akin to something you would see in a Cronenberg film. There is a scene where a bunch of alpacas get fused together into a giant mass, and I just thought it was ripping off John Carpenter's The Thing. I mean, that's really what it reminded me of, where all the dogs get fused into a giant mass in that film. So it just felt like it was copying things. And it's just, the setting's all wrong. They set it in modernity, and you could have set it in modernity. I guess it could have worked, but it would have had to have been more isolated than it was. They were close to the town, for instance, but everybody having their computers and cell phones. The entity disrupts their cell phone signals and everything, but really, what really turned me off to this film was the gore. This didn't have the feeling or the atmosphere of an H.P. Lovecraft story at all. It just didn't. It was really violent, unnecessarily gross for no particular reason. I mean, and what I mean by gross is, this is a spoiler for you, so if you don't want to hear, turn it off now. But I'm going to talk about what really upset me in this film. 3, 2, 1. Okay, so the mother in the film and the young boy, the youngest son, they get attacked by the color, and they get fused together into an entity, and it's really disturbing. It's not scary. That's the problem with the film. This movie didn't scare me. It just disgusted me. So I felt repulsed by it. I found the film distasteful and just unnecessarily, what do I want to say? Mean-spirited? I don't know if that's the word for it. I just didn't like it. The family dynamic in this movie, the short story, of course, the family does fall apart, but nothing as horrific happens to them, to the family itself, to the way that Nathan Gardner acts towards his family. He's more of a man that doesn't want to believe what's happening in the short story. He's in denial, and I think Nick Cage's character is in denial in this one, but he goes full Nick Cage, on these Nick Cage rants that he does in all of his films. For instance, there's a scene where he's like eating all of his tomatoes and chucking them in the trash can, which is pretty over the top. There's a scene where his car won't start, so he starts slamming on the steering wheel, Nick Caging out, just going completely unhinged. So I guess if you want to see some unintentional comedy, you could watch it, but it's so horrific, the body horror aspect of the film, that I just found it off-putting. So I would avoid this one, unless you're into that kind of thing. I'm not. I don't like the really gross, disgusting stuff like that. I just found it, the movie was unintentionally, maybe it was intentionally. I don't know. I don't know what to say about it. I just didn't like it. There, that's my review. Alright, so I'll link the short story below. That's it. That concludes my review. Thanks for watching. Have a wonderful day.